Well, I am so thrilled to have my favorite author, Ann Patchett, here on the island. I didn't give her much choice, actually.
Yeah. No, you didn't. But that's a good story about why I'm here. That I should say, because I never, ever do book festivals, ever. And I was at Chautauqua in New York last summer, and Geraldine was there. And we had met briefly once before in my bookstore, and she asked me to do this festival. And she said, if you do the festival, you and your husband can come and stay with me and my husband. And I actually had this thought of like, it was a real girlfriend thought. Like, I really like you, and the only way we will ever be able to progress is if I come to your book festival. So you are 100% of the reason why I'm here.
Well.
So thank you. It's a good reason, right? Like.
So we all know that you're a brilliant novelist, 7 novels and 3 works of nonfiction, Penn Faulkner's Orange Prizes, and this book, I would have said...
I like that we use the plural, like Penn Faulkner's Orange Prizes. Like, I just win them every year. It's so good.
Okay, we all love Bel Canto, but I love this even better than Bel Canto, so that'll tell you. But I've found out at the bookstore and at Chautauqua that you have other talents. And I was hoping that we might talk a little bit about them too. I don't know.
My singing?
I don't know if anyone else here is aware that you know these 3 things: how to scale an 8-foot wall,
Yeah.
how to help the Hunt brothers corner the silver market, and how to knit up a storm. But
yeah,
I thought,
that's all true.
Can we start with, I love that you described yourself, somebody said, you know, you've got a bookstore, gee, you must be taking a bath. And you said, I don't take baths, that I am the intersection between literature and high finance.
Yeah, that's really true. And it's funny because this has something to do with the novel that I'm writing right now. I am very good with money, and I have been very good with money since I was a kid. And it's just a talent. When I was 9 years old, my sister and I were in a car accident. And my sister got $10,000 and I got $5,000, which was saying something because it was a really horrible car accident. Those were hit by a drunk driver at 10 o'clock on a Sunday morning in Tennessee in 1972. And when I was about 14, or 13, I guess I was 13, I found out that the interest on this money that was being held until my 18th birthday was only something like 2%. And I became driven witless by this information. And my parents allowed me to use the family lawyer and go to court to petition to have control of this $5,000 at 14 instead of waiting until 18. Isn't this why you guys came to hear me today? Isn't this it? I bought Cougarans, which I would not be caught dead by. I didn't have a social conscience at 14, but by God, I had $5,000. I bought Cougarans. I sold them a year and a half later, having almost doubled my money. And then I bought silver.
Wait, you have to tell us where you kept the Krugerrands.
I kept them in the refrigerator of my dollhouse. There were little shelves. But years later, when I read Rabbit is Rich, which is one of my all-time favorite books, and that scene where they have the gold and then the silver, that was me. That was me. So yeah.
You went and got the silver and...
I kept it in my sock drawer. I mean, I had it for years. I mean, the fact is I still have that money. I don't still have the silver, but I just kind of kept turning it over.
You figured out the Hunt brothers were going to make a move and you
I did.
cashed
That's
out.
why. I did.
All right.
I read the financial section when I was a kid. I don't know what that's about, but taking it forward to the bookstore, when people say, "Oh, that's so nice, you're losing everything you have because you own a bookstore," I'm like, "Oh, are you kidding me?" We sell full-priced hardback books all day long. And when Nashville lost it, yay! Nashville lost its 2 bookstores. They were both profitable every month. They were both 30,000 square feet, which is the size of a suburban Macy's. And they were both making it every month. They were closed at a corporate level, not because the stores were failing in Nashville. So I thought, okay, 60,000 square feet of profitable retail space. I'm opening a 2,500 square foot store, which is now a 5,000 square foot store. And how anyone could do the math on that. You don't have to be any sort of whiz to know that that's going to work. And it did. And in 2 weeks, I will have the airport bookstore. So the next time you are changing planes in Nashville, you can come to Parnassus Books, but you won't need to because you will have already bought all of your books at a bunch of grapes. And that's really, really important. I love talking about bookstores. I love talking about books. But my message is very seriously, what matters is that you have to support not my independent bookstore, but your independent bookstore. We all, if you like what you got, I never realized this until I went into retail. I grew up in the South. I grew up thinking that Walmart killed small towns in the South. Absolutely believed that. Until I opened a retail establishment, Walmart did not kill anything, nor did Amazon, nor did Target. Ladies and gentlemen, we did it ourselves. And we did it because we decided that it was more important to save 20 cents on a bag of cotton balls than it was to support our neighbors. So if you like having a bookstore, a hardware store, a grocery store, for God's sakes, in your community, and you're going to want that bookstore when your son comes home and says, "I've got to do my summer reading tonight," and you're going to want to go to your bookstore. So if you've been using Amazon all year round, then you want that bookstore, and you're like, "But where's our bookstore?" That's on you, people. So just at every moment, be mindful and responsible.
I think you're preaching to the
Okay,
choir.
all right, never mind. All right.
But before we leave the bookstore, I have to say that perhaps the only thing I love more than books is dogs, and your store
It's
combines-
lousy with them.
lousy with,
Lousy with
When I
dogs.
came to visit you, you told me that you were one dog away from being shut down by the health department. Can you tell me how the shop dogs started working for you?
Our events director, Nikki Kaufman, started coming to work with a dachshund in a baby sling. And nobody said anything about it. And then I don't think that dachshund has ever put her paws on the ground. And the thing that we're all freaking out about is that Nikki is adopting a baby who is coming at the end of this month. And we don't know that there's going to be room in the sling for both of them. And then I started bringing my dog Sparky, and then Opie came with the manager. And we not only have 5 shop dogs now, but we have a girl at the store who fosters rescue dogs. So right now, we have a puppy that's about the size of a grapefruit named Azar Nafise. And we just keep sticking Azar into shelves and taking its picture and posting it. So now we've got people who are coming into the store wanting a puppy, which is kind of a brilliant intersection of everything you would want from your store.
So has Azar Nafisi met Azar Nafisi?
No, but we have sent pictures. We need to get both of them together. Maybe she wants a puppy,
Right. Well, before we get to the 8-foot wall, I think we should digress a little bit into literature. And I just wanted to say,
having covered money and dogs
and retailing, that you write some of the best first lines. And I'm just going to give myself a little test. I think my favorite is the first line of Taft. A girl walked into a bar.
Yeah.
I love that. A girl walked into a bar. I love The Magician's Assistant. Parsifal is dead, and that is the end of the story. Is that correct?
That's very good. You're doing a better job with this than I would do.
Yeah, I can't do Patron Saint of Liars because it's about the weather.
I can't. Have you ever read one of your books? You know what I mean. Like after it's published?
Yeah, I think I did because I had to do a talk on an old book, and I couldn't remember it, and I thought somebody's going to ask me what's with the white cats, and I'll go, what white cats?
Yeah. But I mean, I haven't read Patron Saint of Liars since 1991.
Holy cow. But I'm forgetting a favorite first line.
When the lights went out, the accompanist kissed her?
That's it.
There you go.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
And also this has a great first line, too, about the party.
Yeah. The party took a turn when Albert Cousins arrived with gin, something like that.
So do you get the first line early in the piece, or is this something that you revise a lot and struggle with? Or
No, it's just that when I sit down to start a book and I think that I know exactly what I'm doing, and the whole book is plotted in my head, and I finally sit down and I start to write a first line, and I think, I think I'll write that first line again. I'll do that again and again because I don't know what the second line is, so I just keep rewriting the first line until it's really super good. Yeah.
Well, it's working for you.
Thank you. And that's really true of the first chapter, too, because I just keep going over and going over and going over. It has to be right. We talked about this yesterday. It has to be right before I can go on. So
yeah, I often wonder, having now judged a couple of book awards, and you start off with a book and you think, this is the winner, this is so fantastic. And then it falls completely apart because endings don't get revised as much.
Right.
I think people are exhausted. They get to the end and they rush to the finish line.
Also, people know how to write, but they don't necessarily always know how to write a novel. I encounter that a lot, where the writing is brilliant. It's so great, and I'm so completely swept away by it. But the person just kind of knows how to write as opposed to writing a novel, which has a shape and an end. Or it's like watching a juggler, for 2 weeks, and they're throwing 20 balls up in the air and catching them behind them. And when show's over, they just put their hands down, and all the balls fall on the floor. And you think, God, I thought there was going to be more than that.
Your endings are really good, too.
It's just that stuff in the middle that actually... That's where I really struggle. But I've nailed the beginning and the end.
Jane Smiley said something I love, which is that happy endings are an aesthetic challenge.
Yes, they are.
And I know that the Brits, who can be a very querulous lot, when you won the Orange Prize, they said, oh, she's too happy. Everything always works out.
They were slaughtered. What the hell is going on? Really? Wow. I didn't read that.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Happiness is subjective. And so a lot of times I feel like an ending is happy, or it's really conclusive and the book has been brought together, and people will say, oh, the ending of that book was like going off a cliff. It was miserable and you didn't bring anything together. So it's all in the eye of the beholder.
I guess. I mean, I think it was John Gardner who wrote, a novelist's business is to push the character's head underwater all the way through the book. And in the end, you have to decide if you're going to sink them or let them swim.
Yeah.
I'm very much in the swim category.
I would definitely like to see them swim. Not because I necessarily want a happy ending, but because I want the reader to want to go on with these people. I want the reader to imagine these characters. I'm always blown away when people say, well, you're going to write a sequel to this or that. And I think that's your job.
Huh.
I've given you enough information about these people. Now you should believe in them and be able to go forward with them and imagine their lives. If that's something, if the book has been successful, I think that's what we do. I'm still thinking about David Copperfield.
But do you know what happened to them all?
I'm not interested.
That's weird, because
then why should I ask you to be interested? Because I've spent a lot more time with them. I really do feel, I feel so much that literary fiction is like love. It's the book happens somewhere between you and me, and it's the chemistry that you have with the book going forward. And it's why you can read a book at one point in your life and hate it, and read a book at another point in your life and love it, or vice versa. The book hasn't changed, you've changed, and therefore the chemistry between you and the book has changed. When I used to teach, when I was in my 20s, I used to always teach One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And I loved it, and I read it over and over again. And I read that book about 5 years ago, and I hated it. I hated it. The book had not changed. He was dead. So, you know, however people respond or interact, you can get such a bad review for a book, and then such a good review for the same book. And it's just the chemistry.
That's right. I, unfortunately, you know, you wish that you could get those reviewers back that gave you the bad review and say, read it again, you might feel different.
Yeah, right, exactly. I thought when you said, I wish you could get those reviewers back, like putting a snake in their mailbox or something.
That's right. But beginnings, endings, the stuff in the middle. Fiction and nonfiction, not many people can do both equally well, but you do. Is it
thanks.
a different muscle?
Oh, totally. Totally. And I wonder if it's probably not true for you, but I wonder. To me, the very hardest piece of nonfiction I've ever written is easier than the very easiest piece of fiction I've ever written.
Oh.
Nonfiction is just incredibly easy for me. And I love it, but I don't take it seriously for myself because it's easy.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Which means I should be doing harder nonfiction. I am currently endeavoring to do 3 books in 3 years. The first one of which totally does not count as a book because it's a photo book on Nashville that I'm doing with a photographer named Heidi Ross and with John Meacham, and it's going to be just about Nashville right this minute, and we're turning that in November. And then next December, I'm turning in the novel that I'm working on, which is all of this without a contract because I don't ever sell anything before I write it. But the thing that I'm really excited about is I am doing a book that I will turn in December of 2019 to be published in May of 2020 called Vote, which because I own a bookstore, I want to make sure that it's out in time for Mother's Day and graduation. It'll be a short book, not a tiny book, but a short book. And it will be in celebration of the centennial of the 19th Amendment, but also largely why we all have to vote. And so it will come, so it'll be out for May for Mother's Day. It will be out then for August for the anniversary, taking us into November for the next presidential election. And I mean it sincerely when I say this is a completely nonpartisan thing. And sincerely, I don't care if you vote the way I vote. I just care that you vote.
Well, I'm so glad you said that because this has been an obsession for me. I grew up in Australia and voting is compulsory. And everybody votes, and I think we get a better result because no matter how disengaged you are, the rest of the time, for that one half hour where you have to get yourself to a ballot box and consider your choices, you're engaged in the political process.
Right.
And I have to say we make it very easy in Australia. We have it on a holiday. My favorite polling booth, my mum lived quite near a beach, and so they would turn the surf club into the polling station. You could come in dripping wet in a bikini with a towel around your waist and do your democratic duty. And when my son, brings home friends, particularly the young women, and I say, did you change your registration now that you're in college? and they go, "Oh, I don't vote," I leap across the table and grab them by their lapels and say, "Women died for this right. How dare you?"
Yes.
And they all think, "God, he's got a crazy mother."
But do you know what's so amazing is so many young people in this country do not know that there was a time in the history of this country that women couldn't vote.
Yeah.
I mean, history vanishes behind us like footprints in the sand. And I think to come up with something, and this all goes back to being a bookseller and knowing what people buy and what people will actually read. And although I believe that there should be a 700-page treatise on this, I really want 120 pages of something with bullet points that you can say, read this, and that people actually will.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you're doing that.
Oh, but that's nonfiction. So anyway, when I think about this, I feel all sorts of stress about the novel. But when I think about writing a book on voting, I'm like, oh, and that'll be my reward. That'll be so much fun.
Huh.
I'll get to do a bunch of research and talk to some people and type it up. What a joy.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've always wanted to be a writer, yes? Yeah. Did you ever consider being anything else?
No.
Huh.
No. Did you?
A journalist.
Well, but guess what? That's being a writer.
Yeah, but I didn't think of it in the same way. And I wasn't harboring a secret desire to be a novelist either. I just wanted to be a newspaper reporter from the time I was 8 years old.
But that wasn't about writing?
It was about reporting, and the writing followed.
And reporting because you wanted to change the world?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and then I realized that, well, my first year was great. I got 3 things done, and toxic site cleaned up, and unaccompanied refugees looked after. And I thought, this is easy. At this rate, I'll change the world in no time. But that was an unusual year. But even though you didn't want to do anything else, in the course of doing the writing, you did train for and...
Well, I mean, the police academy, I trained for the police academy to write.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to write a piece. It wasn't that I wanted to be a cop secretly. Right. And in fact, that's why I bailed out ultimately on that project. When I was 30 years old, my dad was a police officer in Los Angeles for 35 years. And after he retired, I wanted to write a piece about why it was when the LAPD was so vilified and so rightfully vilified in so many ways, it was still the hardest police force in the country to get into. And so I tried out for the academy, and I was going to go through the academy and write a book on the process of going through the academy. And I did it because I wanted to be closer to my father, and I wanted to make my father proud. But about halfway through, he started saying, well, you know, you're not going to be able to write a book unless you spend 2 years on the force. And I was like, Dad, that is just never, ever going to happen. I am never going to spend 2 years on the force. And then his eyes would go all dreamy, and he'd say, and after you spend 2 years on the force, then you could be a Fed, because you would be a great Fed. And I realized that my dad, who had wanted me to be a dental hygienist when I was a child, really, really wanted me to be a cop. And that, in fact, by doing this book, I was going to wind up bitterly disappointing him as opposed to making him proud and happy. And so I bailed. Plus, it was scary as hell.
But, I mean, you're not so tall, and I'm
still 5'7".
Really?
I am.
Okay.
It's really weird. I project short. It's the strangest thing. When I'm in the bookstore looking at a high shelf, somebody who's like 5'2" will come up and say, do you want me to reach that for you? I have a tiny persona somehow.
That is so interesting, because I thought that we were the same height.
No, yeah. I'm big.
Okay. Well, then it's easy to get over an 8-foot wall, I guess.
It's not. If we had one, I'd be happy to show you how to do it. For a long time, I learned how to do it by strength, which is you just jump up, clam onto the top, and then pull yourself up, and that's very hard. And then when I actually went to take the physical abilities test, I was a bunting at Radcliffe when I was training for the police department.
Yeah, that's what really, that was the arresting fact to me.
No pun intended, yeah.
But because when I was at the Radcliffe Institute, all I did was sit around and drink white wine, and you were...
And I was throwing myself over the wall of the divinity school every night. But when I went out, the day before I took the test, my dad and I went out, and there was a team who were training to go over the wall. And what you do is you run, jump, and then you hit, I have a skirt on so I won't show you, with one foot flat on the wall up at your chest, and then you swing a leg over. And that is actually not hard. Physics is our friend. But as Neil will tell us, but all the men vaulted the wall.
Huh.
Yeah. And I was one of 2 women in my group who made it over. All of the other women washed out. But it really was that moment that you just think there really is a difference between men and women. Mm. They go over sideways and just drop.
Right. Have you ever done any other weird research?
I went to Peru and was in an open boat with a guy who pulled a 15-foot anaconda into the boat because he was a herpetologist and professional snake catcher, which I didn't know at the time. I just thought he was a guy in the boat like me. And he stuck his hand into for those of you who have read State of whatever the hell that book is called, he stuck his hand into the water just exactly the way it happens in the book and pulled this anaconda. And the first time he got the anaconda too low, and so it did try to bite his face, and he dropped it. And the second time there would be a second time, right? And he got it right here and pulled it in, and the snake wrapped around him, and he kept it in the boat for 20 or 30 minutes and gave us a lecture on the jaw structure of the anaconda. And I discovered lots of interesting things, like they smell like a skunk could not dream. A skunk being dissected with a bad accident could not dream of making a smell that this anaconda made. Like we all had to just throw our clothes away.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I do research.
So at what point in this moment did he vouchsafe to you that he knew what he was doing?
It was a couple minutes in that he said this was what his job was. He worked with tour groups, and he was sussing out this particular boat to decide if he wanted to bring a tour group on the boat in the future. But when we were going back, I said, so Greg, his name was Greg Greer. And actually, if you want to just have a great time, he lives in Atlanta. Mr. Greg's Reptile Roadshow. He will bring snakes to your kid's birthday party. And I said, Greg, how old were you when you picked up your first snake? And he said, I was 5. Because a snake had eaten off the little one. And I asked him if he had ever been bitten by an anaconda, and he said yes, years ago in Brazil. It had swung back around. He hadn't gotten it high enough up, and it had caught the back of his calf. And he said it took 2 hours using an oar to gently pry out all the teeth because, of course, he would not wish to hurt the anaconda. And when I was writing that scene in the book, I originally, the character Morena, who is saving the child, this is not a spoiler, or if it is, the book's old enough and it's your own fault. I thought there would be a surgical kit on the boat. So she takes a scalpel out and she saws the snake apart. And I sent the pages to Greg, my new friend, and he said, no, that would be like taking off somebody's thigh with a scalpel. You would need about 60 scalpels. And it's just like using an X-Acto knife. And so he said there is no such thing as a boat in the Amazon that doesn't have a sharp machete. She will use a sharp machete. She will not have more than 2 minutes. And because I had grown up in the country in Tennessee, I knew that, in fact, if you cut a head off a snake, the snake, like a chicken, will keep going for quite a while.
Yeah.
Money, dogs, a wall, snake removal. I'm kind of loving where this is going.
Yeah, I just want to share that one of my editors at the Wall Street Journal grew up as a snake catcher.
Oh,
He
really?
was, yeah. He lived on Bayou Black in Louisiana, and he was one of 6 boys, and his dad said, you have to have an acre to a boy. So they lived on a 6-acre spread on the bayou. And he said, you know, he was an unusual guy at the Wall Street Journal, needless to say. And he said, I look around this newsroom some days and I think, dang it, I am the only guy in here who knows how to skin a squirrel. Anyway.
That's good. That's good. My editor at the Journal could not skin a squirrel. I can bank on that.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about Commonwealth because I loved it so much. Actually, that reminds me, I wanted to ask you because Bel Canto was the rip-roaring success, but you were an accomplished and well-reviewed novelist before that. You had 3 books done.
Yeah, it was my 4th book.
Yeah.
And you know, it's an interesting point because I like Bel Canto, but it's not like I wrote 3 lousy books.
That's right.
And then I wrote Bel Canto.
Yeah.
Bel Canto succeeded in the same way The Kite Runner succeeded, which is it was published in May of 2011. I think in hardback it sold 20,000 copies. It didn't do particularly well, but it was September 11th that made that book.
2001.
Because people wanted to read a book about terrorism in their book clubs and discuss it in the same way that they wanted to read a book about Afghanistan. And I think if the book had come out in 2008, it probably wouldn't have done any better than any of my other books. That's a horrible thing to say, but it's true.
I kind of doubt that, but I don't know. I mean, I just think it's a fascinating thing. You probably know, as I do, so many writers who've written absolutely brilliant books that get 0 attention. But I want the question is different, which is I saw you interviewing Michael Chabon, and you started by saying you hit so young, and he did. He was kind of his.
Where did you see me interviewing Michael Chabon?
On YouTube.
Are you serious? That's on YouTube?
Yeah.
I never look. Never look.
But I guess it's a philosophical question. Is it better to be successful early, or do you get more out of it if you've had to slog through the mid-list?
To each their own, and I think different people handle early success differently. I think Michael did fine with it for the most part. I think he got thwarted for a while, but he's such a sane, decent guy. He landed on his feet and was just fine.
And he has Ayala, and you don't mess with her.
That's very true. and also he has 4 kids.
Uh-huh.
And so he really felt like he had to always keep the work going and keep the work going. I'm glad that things worked out for me the way they did, but I think what's more worrisome is I don't think you could have my career now. I don't think that you could write 3 books that sold, some books, okay books, got okay reviews, and that the publishers would hang on for a 4th book. I think that if I was publishing my first novel now, I wouldn't have gotten to a 4th book, or I worry about that.
Yeah, no, I think that it is getting harder and harder by the minute. But luckily, your 7th book, your 7th novel, is the one you said, it should have been your first novel because it's the most autobiographical.
And that I'm really happy about, that it wasn't my first novel, because I think that writing books that were very imagination bound did better for me. Because if I had written that book first, I would have thought that I didn't have anything else to write about.
So it's wonderful. And for those of you who haven't yet had the pleasure to read it, hie thee to the tent and get a copy. You will thank me for the recommendation. It is so rich in so many ways. But embedded in the book is the story of a famous old novelist who has a relationship with a young woman, and he steals the story of her life and writes a book called Commonwealth.
Well, she gives it to him.
Well, she gives it to him.
With regret, but
Yeah. So it reminds me of all the hoo-ha at the moment about who has the right to stories and whose stories can you tell. And you've talked about imagining your way into lives not your own.
Yes.
And in Taft and I think Run particularly, you cross the color line and imagine things from point of view of African American characters.
Yes.
So where do you stand on this apartheid of the imagination?
You know, I stand on the fact that I'm allowed to imagine anything I want, and you're allowed to take me off at the knees for it. And I mean, that's really true. It's I can do it, and if I succeed, good for me, and if I fail, kill me. Really, I mean that seriously. I don't think that anyone can say you are not allowed to imagine something else, another life. I think that fiction is an empathetic act. It is constantly imagining the life of other people. I think it is what we all need to do so much more of. But I completely understand how someone can say, I don't want you imagining my life. It doesn't mean that I'm not allowed to do it. And it doesn't mean that you're not allowed to criticize me fiercely for doing it. Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense, yeah.
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 So, I don't know.
Have you been criticized fiercely by anybody?
No.
That's good.
I haven't. You know what's really interesting is that I very often get this conversation in which people say, have you not been criticized fiercely? And I think, no, I've not. But again, just having the conversation is a very good thing. Just constantly keeping our minds open to everyone else's existence is a very good thing. And looking at what we should and should not be doing to try to make this world better.
Yeah, well.
And can I say on that note, can we go briefly to book recommendations?
I was just going to say, read any good books lately?
I bought a copy of White Rage last night and am now halfway through it. And it's at the tent. Any of you who have seen Carol Anderson during this program have already bought a copy of it. But if you, for some reason, missed her, just go buy a copy of it. It's such an important, beautifully written book, very inspiring for what I want to do on Vote, and a book that I kept thinking, and I wonder if there's anybody here who has read both of the books, but I keep thinking it's a book that I want to stack with Between the World and Me, because I feel like White Rage is the base on which Between the World and Me is sitting on, and they should go out together into the world, and that I sincerely hope that it has the kind of popular success that Between the World and Me got. So yeah, all I do is sell books. Really, all I really want to do is tell you what to read.
What else you got for us?
I said this yesterday, but I just finished a book by Andrew Sean Greer called Less that was funny. And that's the thing that people come into my bookstore wanting. They say, I would like a funny book that is smart and lifts me up because nothing is making me laugh right now. Less by Andrew Sean Greer made me laugh out loud. I will also tell you that if you go to parnassusbooks.net to see pictures of the shop dogs and to read the shop dog diaries, which are pretty extraordinary, once a month I write a post of all of the books that I am reading and liking. So don't feel like you have to scramble. If you Google Ann Patchett bookstore, you will get this list of books that I recommend. I read a book called The Leavers by Lisa Coe. Anybody here read The Leavers by Lisa Coe? Which, again, is such an important book about immigration and the experience of other people coming into this country right now. Here's the difference between opening a bookstore and not opening a bookstore. I used to read classics. I used to read because I wanted to be a better writer. And now I feel like I read as a political act. I read because books have fashion. I never really thought about it before. But fashion is fashion. How we raise our children and what we eat and how we view medicine and how we view politics, everything goes in and out of fashion. And literature also has a fashion. And if you are reading things that are hyper current, you can actually start to see we can actually start to see the fashion of what's going on in the world and also the news of what's going on in the world. And so trouble yourself to read more contemporary literature. Wakey Wang's Chemistry, I love. Miley Malloy's Do Not Become Alarmed. Mrs. Fletcher by Tom Perrotta that came out last week, which is dirty and harsh and so funny and so heartbreaking about the internet and sex, and it's a terrific book. My favorite book of the fall, and my second favorite book of the year. My first favorite book of the year is George Saunders' Lincoln in the Bardo. My second favorite book of the year is Jesmyn Ward's Sing Unburied Sing, which will be coming out in September. And while you are waiting for that, you can read Salvage the Bones, which was a beautiful novel she wrote. So now I'm supposed to take questions from you. Shout it out. I'll repeat it. You were introduced to my writing through Lucy Greeley. Literally or figuratively? Oh, like you knew Lucy? Oh, fabulous.
Yes. We had her speak at the University of Connecticut, and my daughter and I became good friends. But your book about her Truth and Beauty, which wasn't mentioned here, I know you said nonfiction is really not that difficult for you.
Yeah.
I would have thought that would have been.
That was the easiest book I ever wrote.
Was it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Quickly, too. You wrote it very quickly.
I wrote it quickly. Yeah. It's a book about my friendship with the writer Lucy Greeley, who died in 2002 when we were 39. And everything in that book, I knew it was going to be a book not about me, not about Lucy, but about us. So the action would take place when we were both together. It would begin the day we met. It would end the day she died. And I would follow the course of that action. So in that way, not only was it easy, it was the best gift I ever gave myself. We have this weird habit in this country of not talking about our dead people and the people that we love and miss and would feel real joy. It's like people don't want to bring it up for fear of upsetting us, as if we have forgotten. I feel like the luckiest person in the world because wherever I go, somebody says, I knew Lucy, or I feel like I knew Lucy through you. That is a gift we should all be giving one another all the time. Because once you get past the enormous sadness of losing someone, you get back to the enormous joy of their life. And that's life. I mean, that's just the best thing in the world, to be able to keep thinking about and talking about the people that we love and miss and asking, who do you love? Who do you miss? It's good. Thank you. Do you want to? Sure.
Can you speak more about your research for State of Wonder?
Can I speak more about my research for State of Wonder?
Can you speak more about your research for State of Wonder? I found it such a complex, multi-layered book. There was so many
Sure.
issues.
I'm married to a doctor. That was really handy. So we came up with, how would it be plausible? My husband figured out how it would be plausible for these women. They could chew bark because quinine was connected with malaria, quinine being a bark, but there would have to be something else. Okay, so there's an egg, there's a moth. A lot of this stuff, of course, I just make up. 98% of it I just make up. But then some of the really weird stuff I didn't make up. It's the nicest thing in the world to go to somebody, again, your homework, when you're not asking each other about your dead people, your other homework is go to somebody and ask them what they do. I called the head malarialist at Bethesda Naval Hospital that does all of the malarial research for the government and said, I'd like to come to Maryland and spend the day with you. I'm so interested in what you do. He did not know who I was. He did not care what I was doing. No one had ever called him and said, I am so interested in malaria and mosquitoes. May I just ask you questions all day? The guy had tears in his eyes all day long. People want to talk. All you have to do in life is lean forward, make eye contact, and nod your head every now and then. I always say to students, if you want to get an A, sit in the front row, lean forward, make eye contact, and nod. It's all your teacher wants.
With that advice, I think we need to call it a day.
Thank you Thank you. Wait.
Give it up for Ann Patchett.
Wait. I want to say something. Okay, ready? I'm going to say something. All right? I am tall. That's right. The other thing that I do owning a bookstore is I interview people on stage all the time. And it takes energy and work. And I so often walk off of stage and say, thank you so much for doing this. But thank you so much for doing this because you are...
Stop it.
No, listen. But you're one of my heroes and my friend. And it's very honoring to have your big brain applied to me. So thank you.
Very much.